Hey, thank you, Ron. Hey, everyone. Thanks for hanging in with us to learn more about AWS. In the previous session, we have talked about security in general, about what are some of the security infrastructure level built-in tools that were available on the AWS platform, and how to secure your resources. In this session, what we can address is we can address the challenges of every single company that essentially struggles with identifying the tool set for managing different services, whether it be on-prem or hybrid solutions. How are some of our customers trying to solve those problems? So we're going to cover a service called Systems Manager in this session, and we will talk about the capabilities of the Systems Manager and what essentially it provides us to help you manage multiple different systems in a single pane of glass view scenario. In this session, what we can do is we can do a quick overview of Systems Manager and its capabilities, and we're going to talk about some of the use cases for each of those different components. Right, so getting onto it. Again, we all know this, right? So essentially, cloud has become pretty much a new normal. We have seen enterprises to small businesses essentially moving into the cloud, and the reason that everybody is moving into the cloud is to take advantage of the increased agility, elasticity, lower cost, and global reach. So this is not a news to you, and that's why you are in this sessions as well. But again, so let's talk about some of the challenges this new cloud norm brings us, right? So every time we talk about everybody is moving into the cloud, so essentially when we're also seeing that a lot of customers, as a very first step when they move into the cloud, are bringing their own existing on-prem tooling to manage the systems on AWS as well. So if you have a patch management tool, if you have a vulnerability scanning tool, if you have an application packaging and pushing tool, a lot of customers, instead of trying to bring or learn or duplicate their efforts, they're essentially trying to bring their existing tools to the cloud as well, which essentially makes a lot of sense because they don't want to invest a whole lot of time and effort into identifying new tools that can help their existing on-prem data centers as well as on the cloud. So as, again, the effort pretty much makes sense because everybody wants to get to that single pane of glass or a single tool to manage both the AWS and on-prem machines. But when we do that, of course, it's going to bring a lot of challenges because what customers have told us is that many of these traditional tools are not really designed to handle the scalability and the agility of the cloud or the dynamic nature of the cloud in that sense. So we see that the elasticity provides you with the capability of spinning up machines, spinning down machines. So all of a sudden, if you start spinning up 10 machines and the next hour the machines go down, then how do you essentially make sure that you are keeping those machines up to date in terms of vulnerability scanning or in terms of maintaining the images and things like that? So whenever you have this problem, essentially it becomes very, very difficult in terms of managing it with a single tool set. And of course, if you are choosing to go something very cloud native, then you end up with like two different sets of systems and you lose the ability to have that single pane of glass for all different resources. So that's the next problem. So even if you're successful in bringing a significant level of complexity and the overhead of maintenance, and finally, these on-prem tools will still have some form of licensing cost that you still have to manage and bear. So we will talk about, I'm pretty sure that most of the software that you use for any kind of patch management, scanning systems, anything that you do on-prem as regular maintenance and operations, essentially have a separate tool with separate licensing terms and conditions with either a per machine license or per user license. It could be various different things. And the licensing essentially is very, very complex and it's very expensive. And so in this scenarios, how do you essentially apply this licensing for something that is a short-lived server in AWS? How do you handle those scenarios? So these are the things that we have dealt with. We've been dealing with a lot of customers complaining about, hey, we need a single tool that can essentially handle all these things together and also make it robust and also trying to keep as consistent as possible across the data center as well as the AWS cloud. So when you think about hybrid cloud management, how do you essentially deal with these things? And it is typical that you will end up with multiple regions, as we saw in the previous presentations. There will be multiple regions, there will be multiple accounts. So if you run into those scenarios, how do you essentially control all of those things in one single place? So this is where we will talk about the service called Systems Manager. I am hoping that if you're already on the AWS platform, you are using some of the features of the Systems Manager. But if you're not, I would definitely recommend you to go take a look at that because Systems Manager is not a not a very popular service in the AWS console like SageMaker for machine learning or the other ones. But when it comes to rubber meets the road where, hey, I got this challenge of maintaining and managing my machines, I got to have some form of control. Systems Manager is super efficient in terms of what it can do in terms of the day-to-day operations. It might not be as cool as, hey, I'm going to solve a really cool case of machine learning, but Systems Manager is very effective in getting these operations going for you in a very efficient manner. So again, what does Systems Manager provide you? Think of it as a cockpit for hybrid cloud. Essentially gives you all the operations in one single location. Supports ongoing systems management at scale. And again, the terms at scale is very important here because of the transient clusters or the transient environments, the number of accounts that you might have. Then Systems Manager essentially supports these multiple account setup and scenarios where you can actually maintain multiple machines in a single place. We can essentially have that single console and bring all the operational data together, and it has various native capabilities, and we'll talk about these capabilities in just a few minutes. The good part about Systems Manager is it doesn't matter whether it's a Linux or a Windows machine, whether it's on-prem or whether it's on AWS or even with other clouds as well. So if you have maybe a small footprint on another third-party cloud provider, then if you want to still have some kind of visibility into those machines, then Systems Manager can still help you with that kind of setup as well. So what are the different capabilities? So if you go into the Systems Manager console today, you will actually see about like 17 different capabilities, and it's constantly increasing. So each of these actually perform different set of operations, and that help you run and maintain in terms of operationalizing and in terms of making your environment secure. If you look at, again, for a general consideration, if you really want to categorize them, you can probably categorize them in 4 different categories here. But again, there is a lot of bleed of these services into different categories as well, because they can actually perform multiple different functions. So at a high level, we were looking at operations management, we are looking at actions and changing and the changes that we want to apply. We are looking at instance and maintenance of the nodes, and the fourth kind of section or subsection that we can think about is the shared resources. How do we manage and maintain multiple resources in the same single location? So we're going to talk about all of these services. However, the exciting part about the Systems Manager is most of the services are actually free, except about, so out of the 17 different services, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 services that there is a very small cost to it, and the rest of the services are absolutely free to use. Now, the cost of these services that we're talking about is also extremely fractional when compared to the traditional licensing that you have to purchase. If you have to purchase a patch management tool, or if you have to purchase a vulnerability scanning tool, these are very expensive tools, and they charge you a maintenance fee, a support fee, and then per machine fees. Then you get licensing audits, and then there's a lot of things that are involved in it. And we essentially try to make that as simple as possible and at a fraction of the cost of what the tooling costs you on-prem. And we'll not be able to talk about all these services, but I'm going to at least give you a high-level overview of a few of the important services so that you can go back and dig deeper into the other ones. So the first and foremost important thing to know about Systems Manager is the Systems Manager agent, or as we call it, as the SSM agent. So the SSM agent essentially, so the solution is agent-based. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to install this agent on a virtual machine, whether it be on-prem, whether it be on AWS, or it's going to be on a different cloud provider altogether. So it doesn't matter. So this agent is the one that's communicating back and forth, and it packs a lot of features and functionalities within that agent. So now, if it's an EC2 instance on Amazon or within AWS, then the AMIs that we are supplying already have these agents installed, so you don't have to do anything special. But if you're bringing your own custom AMIs, you essentially need to bootstrap your machines to make sure that you install these agents on those devices. It also makes it easy for you to update, manage, and configure, and we'll talk about all those different options in just a few minutes. One good feature about resource groups is you can essentially group these multiple different systems in under resources. So this is essentially a feature where it gives you the ability to create these building blocks for your application. For example, if I have all production applications that are probably one set of group and one set of patches or something has to be applied on those machines, then I can group them as one single group. I can apply different tags. I can filter out based on the tags. I can filter out based on application groups. In this scenario, a screenshot here, if you can see this, it actually is grouped by front-end application. And I can also have all the servers, all the things that are related to that particular workload. I can group them together so that I can control all the machines together in one single shot. Again, it gives you a lot of insights. Essentially, it talks about all the API calls that have been made, the cloud trail logs, the AWS config, the cloud watch logs. I don't know how many of you are are familiar with these terms within AWS, the cloud watch and the cloud trail. So these are the fundamental monitoring tools that we have for you to monitor the resource on the cloud. And again, these are very closely integrated with all the other services. So once you have these resource groups, so let's quickly understand how this session. So this is the first feature within the Systems Manager service. It's called a Session Manager. So the way that the Session Manager works is, think of if you have a virtual machine that is sitting in the cloud, and this is inside this red dotted line here, which is inside a security group. It's an EC2 instance. So if you have to ever go and make any changes to that machine, you essentially have to log onto that machine, which means you have to open the ports and you essentially log onto the machine to create the changes or make the changes. A lot of customers, what they do is they use something called Bastion host so that you're not exposing your machine to the entire network or entire networks or multiple networks. So essentially you're using a Bastion host to log that functionality down further. So what Session Manager gives you is essentially it is a fully managed service that provides you with an interactive browser-based shell and a CLI experience. So within AWS console, when you click on a server and pick and choose, the agent is the one that is responsible for creating that tunnel for you, and you don't have to open up any network ports after that fact. So you can simply use the AWS console to simply start typing your commands at a CLI or a browser shell-based commands, whether it's Windows or a Linux system. So it essentially makes it much more easier for you to directly log in, and you don't have to open any ports to those machines. Makes it extremely secure. It also works cross-platform, as I mentioned, whether it be Windows or Linux. Again, all the activity that you're typing in, the logging and auditing activity of that session is essentially logged and is all recorded. So you know exactly who is logging in when, what's been changed, and what's happening on those machines, or what changes were made. At the same time, you can control the permissions with the IAM permissions, which is identity and access management permissions, as we saw in the previous presentations. You can decide who has access to these roles and who can essentially make changes. And again, good part about it is every single command that you type in that window essentially gets logged, so you know exactly what's happening on those machines, not just about who's logging onto the machine. So pretty cool in that sense. The second the capability of the Systems Manager is called as a run command. So run command, think of it as a remote execution of scripts. So if you don't want to log into a machine, you want to simply remotely run scripts on a certain set of machines, then run command is your friend. It's pretty effective. What it does is, depending on how you configure it, you have a set of users who will be using a curated set of documents, and these documents is what we call as SSM documents. So SSM documents are typically, think about it as a simple PowerShell script or maybe a bash script that you write for your operations that you do at your data center level. These are usually written in YAML and JSON, so you can essentially create those documents, which are SSM documents, and you can use this feature called run command, and you can push that script to multiple different machines at the same time. And you can save that output in various different locations if you want to. It's very effective in remote management of systems. You don't have to worry about opening ports or opening any connections. All the security vulnerabilities are taken care of because you're not installing anything additional than the SSM agent that is running on the system itself. So in this case, if you're wondering why you use run command, what's a session manager? Run command is for issuing commands at scale, where session manager actually gives you or logs you into the operating system, where you have like full interactive mode that is available, right? Again, for run command is for concurrency control, error control, all of those things can be controlled. There are a lot more features in the run command, not just running the script. It actually also can give you how many concurrent run commands can run at the same time. If there are errors, then how do you do that error control and things like that. So if you're pushing a wrong script, how do you make sure that you're actually getting a feedback? So there are a lot of other features in that are part of the run command itself. So that's the fundamental difference between run command versus session manager. Pretty cool in terms of remote management. Again, as I said, this essentially gives you a single pane of glass view for machines that are on-prem as well as on AWS, because you can run these agents on-prem servers as well. So you don't have to have a separate tool for on-prem machines, and you don't have to have separate machine for AWS. So it's all one single view at this point. The other feature that I want to talk about is the state manager. Essentially, it is a service that keeps EC2 instances and the hybrid infrastructure in a defined state. So the idea here is that you want to define a configuration state for these machines, and that is machine, when you see that there is a configuration drift, that configuration drift is identified and being taken care of automatically by in using some form of automation that can essentially run the run command in AWS platform. So what that means is this is where the AWS Systems Manager can really help in securing and scaling the configuration management of the services. So let's say, for example, if you're using something like Ansible, Chef, or Puppet for configuration management, then you can essentially integrate that with the state manager as well. So which essentially gives you a good way to manage the infrastructure consistently across both the platforms. Again, all these features are optional. If you already have an Ansible setup, or if you already have a Chef or Puppet setup that you want to use instead of State Manager, you can always do so. So just like any other AWS services, you can pick and choose what options you want to use. But again, if you don't have some of those complex setups that are already in place, like Chef setup and Ansible setup, then you can use State Manager for that purpose. The next feature I want to talk about is maintenance windows. So maintenance windows essentially, again, as the name says, it essentially helps you control the maintenance schedules. It's fairly straightforward. It helps you design those maintenance schedules for different systems. Again, if you're used to doing this patch management with your existing tools, it's very similar to that, where you decide what the schedule is going to look like, and then what kind of jobs are you going to run during that scheduled maintenance windows for different systems. In this scenario, you can actually use run commands. You can actually use systems manage automation workflows. We will talk about that in a minute. If you want to run like custom functions like Lambda functions, then the SSM agent is going to support that as well. So you can run those as well. And if you have like step functions essentially is another service within AWS. If you don't know what that is for, step function essentially helps you orchestrate multiple different tasks in a certain order. So if you want to run those step functions, so that is also available as well. So essentially the maintenance window supports these 4 different form of task automation runs on the platform, which makes it very convenient, very robust to use. The next feature within the Systems Manager is called the Inventory Manager. Again, it's fairly easy to understand from the name itself, which is essentially it's a scalable way of collecting and querying and auditing the different systems. So the role of Inventory Manager is to collect the software inventory of all my servers and present that in a queryable fashion. So the idea is, like, for example, there are a lot of times you might have agents that are doing this in on-prem today. You might have, let's say, an SCCM agent that is essentially collecting all the information about all the machines that are all the different pieces of software that are running on that machine. So very similarly, Inventory Manager also does the exact same thing. But again, the one advantage that you have here is because on-prem, you might have this problem of, hey, I might have this agent running on like maybe 100 machines, but there are always like those 4 or 5 machines that nobody knows that exist. But in the cloud, that you don't have that problem. You know exactly where these resources are and what are the different resources. So it will be very easy for you to pull the information from these different machines using Inventory Manager. So the idea is, in this case, is that the most common scenarios is, let's say, for example, if I want to know, hey, how many machines have like 2016 Microsoft SQL Server that we run today? Then essentially you can simply build a dashboard to identify where these applications are running and what are the application issues, or the application is maybe end of life, or maybe there are like other vulnerabilities that have to be patched, which we never did. So essentially the Inventory Manager keeps an inventory of all those things and also gives you the flexibility to flag those machines so that you can take appropriate actions on top of that. So again, pretty useful in terms of discovering and auditing your software, helps you reduce the security incidents, and gives you instant analysis as well. So as I mentioned, so you can, all this information is essentially applied or given to you in a queryable fashion. So what you can also do is you can extend the functionality and create your own dashboards if you want to. So this custom dashboards that you can create says, hey, show me all the machines that have XYZ version of a particular software, which is probably outdated and that needs to be patched. So I'm going to pull up a report and I can pull up the number of machines based on the tags or based on the business units that you decide or the resource groups. And then once I identify what that is, I can simply go in there and I'm going to start patching those machines using systems automation or the run commands and the other tools that are available out there. So all these processes, since they're so closely linked together, it makes it much more easier for you to combine these resources in one place and build a full ecosystem around it. Whereas if you are sticking to the existing tools on-prem, you might have a completely separate tool for patch management, which has no interaction with the with the scanning engine, which has no interaction with the inventory management CMDB systems. So these are all different tools from different vendors, and you will never be able to bring all the information together to get to something more meaningful. So the idea of Systems Manager essentially is bringing all these capabilities under one umbrella, so that you can start building your own custom dashboards based on what is important to you. And you can, because they are so closely integrated with each other in terms of APIs, you can simply use one versus the other or link these different services to actually make it more automated. Helps you maintain a better security posture than you can ever do with any existing tools on-prem. The other capability that we want to talk about is going to be the patch manager. Again, fairly straightforward. Essentially helps you roll out operating systems and application patches using custom defined rules. So you have full flexibility of what kind of patches that you want to run. So think about in terms of Windows patching, right? I mean, you might be using WSS, you might be using some of the third-party tool that you might have to run these patches. How do you maintain and manage the patch baselines? How do you maintain or manage the patch compliance? So these are all the things that essentially we are helping out in terms of patch manager service as part of the Systems Manager tool set. So the primary focus again is security related updates. You can essentially create custom patch policies based on different baselines. You can apply it based on the schedules. You can apply it based on the maintenance windows, which was the previous one that we talked about. And let's think about in terms of like if you want to apply these critical updates like 0-day vulnerabilities, you can immediately do that because you have the information and you have the automation built in. You don't have to do additional research to bring in write scripts and do all these things. So essentially, these are easily available for you to start leveraging using the run commands and like deploying the updates and patches to multiple machines at the same time. So that's what a patch manager does for you. There's another component of the Systems Manager, which is called Compliance Manager. So again, the Systems Manager, if AWS Systems Manager lets you scan your managed instances for patch compliance and configuration inconsistencies. So think of in terms of, let's say, for example, there might be certain machines that are missing some kind of patches or some kind of vulnerabilities, or there might be inconsistencies, right? So there might be an application where somebody had troubleshoot something, uninstall and reinstall, and all of a sudden that machine falls out of compliance because your defined compliance was it had to have this particular version, particular software with a certain version and certain firmware update. And if you don't see that, then essentially that is actually flagged as a compliance issue inside your dashboard. So all it does is it simply scans all the machines, finds the information, compares it against your baseline, and tells you whether it's compliant or not, and gives you an option on how to automate the fixing of that particular problem. So this also gives you a data in terms of exportable data, where you can simply query the data using different services like Athena. And as said, once you have the data at your hand, you can essentially build your own dashboards using services like QuickSight and create your own custom dashboards for different operations teams. So this is one example of how those 3 or 4 different services come together. Let's say, for example, how do I identify compliance with my patch manager? So in this scenario, on the left-hand side, which is the AWS services, on the right-hand side is your corporate data center. These are a bunch of servers. Now I set up my baseline, and my baseline says, hey, my baseline has to be looked at, and I look at the baseline using my compliance tool. If it is out of baseline, then essentially I'm going to use the maintenance window, and I'm going to kick off the patch manager job, and the patch manager job essentially goes and patches those machines for whatever vulnerability that is. So think about in terms of quickly applying patches for 0-day vulnerabilities like Spectre or different other things that are extremely important that has to be patched immediately. So this automation can be built in, no need for you to go back and verify in different tools. Essentially all these tools combine together to give you a better security posture. Another feature within the Systems Manager is called Distributor. So the Distributor essentially is a software packaging deployment service. So if you have different packages, then you can simply take those packages and deploy to different machines. You can also create your own packages. We have some built-in packages that are out there for you to play with, which essentially makes it easy for you. If you, again, think of this as a very good alternative for Systems Manager, for SCCM tool, where you're essentially creating those packages and then you want to deploy those packages to different machines. So pretty useful in the way that it does this. Again, integrates with other services, so you know exactly what package is deployed to what machine, and if it's missing, you know how to fix it as well. The next one I want to quickly talk about is AWS Systems Manager Automation. Essentially, this is much more robust and gives you a platform to orchestrate like multiple different operation flows. So think about in terms of all the different things that you want to manage and maintain. Going into the cloud is a very cool and easy concept. We can simply start spinning up machines. But when it comes to really managing and maintaining these machines, right, the operations team is the one that's challenged with these operations of maintaining these machines at scale with ever-changing resources. Now you can build these automations, you can build these DevOps workflows within using the automation manager and run these scripts at scale. So like for example, simple examples, right? What kind of automations can you run? So think about manual automations, which is like running through API, console, CLI configurations, and things like that. If you want to run scheduled maintenance windows or state manager rules, or if you want to trigger something based on an event, let's say for example, there was an event, somebody logged into a machine, and you think that is probably not safe, then you can essentially run a script to remediate it automatically, right? So these are trigger based. So to be more specific, right, what kind of automations can you use? So these are some of the simple examples, and probably you can think of more examples based on your business case as well. So simple things could be, I want to create a snapshot. I want to create an image of a certain machine. I want to delete a snapshot. I want to attach an IAM role to an instance. I want to configure an S3 bucket for versioning. I want to set up inventory management. I want to set up S3 bucket encryption. Or if I want to set up, like, if I want to simply resize the EC2 instance, if I want to make sure that these and these patches are upgraded on a machine, if I want to troubleshoot something. So like there are so many different use cases with automation that you can do. Think of any kind of automation operations that you do at the data center level as a Windows admin or a Linux admin on a data center level. You will be able to do all of those in a very automated fashion easily on the AWS platform using these different tool sets because of the way that we essentially configure them to work with each other. The next capability of that is we're going to talk about a system is called parameter store. So parameter store, simply think about it as a centralized location where you can securely store your data and secrets. So what that means is, let's say for example, if I have to pass a database secret, which is a database password from a machine to a machine, then I can simply reference them to this centralized parameter store where the data is kept secretly, which means it's encrypted by default, and you will never anybody who is logging into these machines will never be able to actually see the actual string of that data that you actually put in, whether it be a secrets, whether it be a password, whether it be an environment variable, whether it be application settings that are critical to the systems, whether it be an IP address. You can essentially configure or encrypt any kind of string data that can be put in the parameter store. So again, there are a lot of different use cases. Essentially helps you with making your environment very, very secure. If you're not using parameter store today, and if you don't want to use Systems Manager, but that's okay, but at least take a look at parameter store as one individual feature, which is going to make your environment much more secure, whether if it's a microservices based model where you're passing secrets between different machines, it essentially really helps you a lot. Ops Center is another feature. Essentially, Operations Center, again, fairly straightforward, gives you the details of what is happening with all these different tools at any given point in time. You can view, we can investigate, you can resolve operational work items. So think about in terms of handing off between different teams. So there might be one team responsible for patch management, but there might be another operations team that is only looking at, hey, if something is going wrong, I'm going to report it back to somebody else, and I'm going to handhold or I'm going to raise a ticket to pass this information on to another team, where the other team essentially writes the scripts and the fourth team essentially actually does the patching. So let's say, for example, if that scenario, if you are in that scenario where there are multiple teams have multiple different roles, then Ops Center will give you a single view of what are the different things that are happening in the environment and who can do what and who can essentially flag it, who can non-flag it, and things like that. So think about in terms of on-prem resources or AWS resources, you should be able to do this fairly seamlessly. You can also build dashboards. We talked about dashboards. Again, dashboards are at many levels. If you want to use simply CloudWatch dashboards for improved visibility, you can set those things up. If you have a NOC center where you have a help desk team that is essentially looking at all these different dashboards to see what kind of activity is happening, what are the services that are compliant, what are the services that are not compliant. So you can build your custom dashboards any which way you want and combine all the different capabilities of the Systems Manager and bring them to one single dashboard if you really want to. If you think about the power of automation and the APIs, when you bring these different tools together, you can actually accomplish a lot more because you have much better visibility than those individual tools that you're used to today in the data centers. So that is what we're trying to solve for in this case. Trusted advisor and health dashboards. I don't know if you have an AWS account, I would recommend you go take a look at the trusted advisor and health dashboards. These are essentially the features that actually tell you what are the things that need immediate attention, what are the things that actually need action and things like that. So again, this is a free service. It's available to everybody. If you have an AWS account, you should be able to simply go to Trusted Advisor and see what is the status of the different problems in your environment, and what are the things that you can work on, and what are the things that you can remediate immediately. Again, you can also build personal dashboards within that as well. So that's another level of customization that we provide you. So definitely check that out. Again, so finally, right, the important thing. So once you have this end-to-end visibility, we also give you a dashboard for Trusted Advisor, which essentially talks about those different pillars of well-architected review. And since this is a security-based conversation, in terms of security, essentially gives you all the different things that we think are important to you. There might be a lot of things that you might not even pay attention to today if it's a data center or even the cloud operations. We essentially picked up a lot of important things from various different customers, and we have seen a lot more scenarios with different customers, and we incorporated all those features inside the AWS console. So if you are if you already have an AWS account, then simply go to Trusted Advisor and see what kind of things that you see in this particular console. And anytime you see those oranges and red dots, just make sure you click on them and identify if that's important to you or not. So again, the idea of this was to give you a quick overview. I know there's a lot more to the Systems Manager, but 30 minutes of the session does not really justify talking about every single service in depth. But again, the idea was to introduce you to Systems Manager and see where your operation teams are struggling, and see if you can bring some kind of uniformity across multiple different tool sets, across multiple different platforms, to make it easier and help you automate multiple things together.